The Chicago White Sox added Bryan, Ramos, and Jose Rodriguez to the 40-man roster before the Rule 5 deadline on Tuesday. White Sox now have 9 infielders on their roster. What makes Ramos and Rodriguez so special, and when can we see them in the big leagues? We won't know for a while what the exact roster will look like come spring training. But the 2023 Chicago White Sox will be a better prepared team because of their new manager, Pedro Grifol.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can't win a pennant in April or May, but you might be able to lose one. What do former colleagues of Pedro Grifol say about his preparedness? And the White Sox add a couple of infielders to their 40-man roster. So the Rule 5 draft deadline was on Tuesday at 5 p.m. And again, what's all this Rule 5 draft stuff? Well, this is per MLB. Eligible minor league players must be added to the club's 40-man roster, or teams will be at risk of losing them in the Rule 5 draft, which will take place at the end of the winter meetings. Per Major League Baseball, players signed at age 18 or younger need to be added to their club's 40-man roster within 5 seasons, or they become eligible for the Rule 5 draft. Players who signed at age 19 or older need to be protected within 4 seasons. The White Sox 40-man roster was at 36 at the start of Tuesday, but by about 3:30 or so, the White Sox added 2 names to the list and brought that number up to 38. This was from the White Sox press release on Tuesday. The Chicago White Sox have selected the contracts of infielders Bryan Ramos and Jose Rodriguez from Class AAA Charlotte. Ramos, 20 years old, batted a combined 266, 338, 455 with 19 doubles, 1 triple, 22 home runs, 86 RBIs. 72 runs scored over 120 games last season between Class High A Winston-Salem and Class AA Birmingham. He ranked among White Sox organizational leaders in RBIs, 3rd, home runs 5th, hits 6th, total bases 6th with 210, runs scored 8th, slugging percentage 8th, and extra base hits tied for 9th with 42. Ramos hit safely in 15 straight games from April 10th through the 30th, going 26 for 64. That's a 406 average with 6 doubles, 3 home runs, and 15 RBIs. Ramos is listed as a 3rd baseman, and in terms of prospect rankings, he is rated as number 5 in the White Sox system. Per MLB.com, Ramos moves well for his size, but he should slow down as he fills out and likely won't have more than fringy speed. His solid arm strength bounced back after shoulder soreness limited him to DH and second base for the first half of 2021. And he has decent range and reliable hands at the hot corner. His lack of quickness makes second base more of a stretch, and some scouts wonder if he'll eventually wind up in an outfield corner. The other player that the White Sox added, Jose Popeye Rodriguez. He's 21 years old, hit 280, 340, 430 with 21 doubles, 6 triples, 11 home runs, 68 RBIs, 75 runs scored, and 40 stolen bases in 104 games with Birmingham in 2022. He ranked among Southern League leaders in steals, second place, triples tied for second, hits third, batting average fourth, RBIs tied for fifth, runs scored tied for sixth, total bases seventh with 189. The 5'11", 210-pound Rodriguez had a slash line of 319, 413, 768 with 4 doubles, 9 home runs, and 17 RBIs over 17 games in August before suffering a season-ending left-hand fracture. Rodriguez is listed as a shortstop second baseman, and in terms of prospect rankings, he is rated as number 7 in the White Sox system. Per MLB.com, a solid runner, Rodriguez is aggressive on the base paths and led Sox farmhands with 30 steals, 41 attempts last season. He has solid arm strength, but just average range at shortstop, where he needs more consistency. Club officials believe he makes enough plays to stay at short, but he might be better suited for second base. So the White Sox add a few more infielders to their 40-man roster. You thought the White Sox had a lot of DH first base hybrids. Sox have a lot of infield options, especially second base, and have done well over the years producing serviceable options. With this surplus of infielders, it makes the big 3-year, $16.5 million deal that Lurie Garcia got last offseason even more confusing. Even if the deal was perhaps market value for a big league utility guy, the White Sox have options. So when will we see Rodriguez or Ramos? Who knows? According to MLB prospect rankings, the ETA for Ramos is 2024, and the ETA for Rodriguez is 2023. Pedro Grifol has never managed in the big leagues, but I'm going to tell you why his work ethic and preparedness should help ignite the White Sox. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On White Sox listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Did you know over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day. That's half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, stay in control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. There's no safe like Simply Safe. You know, the more I read about Pedro Grifol, the more I think the White Sox will definitely be prepared to play each and every day. Grifol seems like a guy that prides himself on being ready for the challenge ahead, doing his homework, and maybe even over preparing. Again, who knows if players will return to form, but it won't be for a lack of preparation. Here are some interesting quotes by those who have worked with Grifol that I saw in a athletic article from a couple weeks ago. You would think you would get to a point where you could rest on your laurels because of the accomplishments that you have achieved, said Ned Yost, former Royals manager. Salvi Perez would be out in spring training every day at 8 o'clock, working on receiving, working on blocking, working on his throwing. He was in the cage before every game with Pedro, working to prepare himself for that night. Here you've got a guy that's an elite player that still has bought into the investment that Pedro has paid into his life. He understands what baseball, the national pastime for over 100 years, but he also understands the new part of the game, the analytical part that can take players to a little bit of a different level than they can execute, Yost said. Pedro would get in there and break all that stuff down for me. He would help me understand exactly why we needed to do things. He helped me understand a lot of the basic analytical stuff because I didn't come up in the analytical era. For me, a lot of this stuff was new, and he is extremely versed in all of this. Here's another one. When you're going to sit in front of a computer screen hour after hour and players just continue to roll in, and you just sit there and you're walking them through how they need to prepare, it's pretty impactful, said former Royals general manager Dayton Moore. The thing I admire so much about Pedro is he would sit in front of the computer, the iPad, the video screen with many of our players and walk them through how to game plan for certain pitchers on each and every night, how to be prepared. He's a great teacher. But I mean, whether it was Soler or Perez or Mondesi, I can go on and on with guys. Another one from Yost here. Pedro has interviewed a number of times, and quite frankly, I've been shocked that nobody has given him an opportunity to manage a major league club. And that was for good reason, I think, because I think that this situation is perfect for him. Yost, of course, talking about the White Sox job now. Pedro has been ready to manage for a while. He really was, said Moore. To me, he's one of the more well-kept secrets in all of baseball, and baseball is getting ready to find out what a leader he is. So how important is setting the right tone early and getting off to a fast start in spring? I'm going to tell you how the 1959 Chicago White Sox learned a valuable lesson that can resonate in 2023. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I started reading this book called Strength Up the Middle by Larry Callis. It came out a while ago, I believe late 90s. And I've been sitting on this book, was trying to get through a few, like Chili Dog MVP, which I did. Strength Up the Middle, a fascinating book about the entire season of the 1959 White Sox. So started reading it, and then there was a part fairly early in the book talking about the previous year, 1958, and how bad the beginning of the year was for the White Sox. They pretty much lost contention in April. 1959 was very different from the White Sox. This was an excerpt from the book. The start of the 1959 season for Chicago was in sharp contrast to their start in 1958, when the ball club was effectively, if not mathematically, eliminated from the pennant race during the first 2 months of the season. Manager Al Lopez recognized that in 1958, he had allowed the veteran players to slowly work their way into top playing condition so that they would not be worn down in August and September. This strategy, unfortunately, put them in such a deep hole that they couldn't dig out, despite their league-leading .582 winning percentage after the 1958 All-Star Game. Lopez worked the players much harder in the spring of 1959, and the new strategy appeared to pay off. So after I read that excerpt, I definitely thought about the 2022 White Sox when I read that part. Resting players, starting off slow, and creating a situation that was just too difficult to overcome. Even when they did get hot for that short period of time when Miguel Cairo took over. So going back to Pedro Grifol and how does this tie in? This was a quote from Pedro Grifol. "You can't win a pennant in April and May, but you sure can lose one. You really have to be careful how easy you take it." I absolutely love that mentality. And again, who knows what this team will look like come opening day 2023. But I have a feeling the mindset will be much better than last year. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll continue to examine off-season White Sox scenarios as the Sox go full steam ahead with the Pedro Grifol era. I really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.